Hello everyone, welcome to task for today. We are studying sociology through different tasks and we have reached TFT-24, which is on politics and society. In the last few TFTs we read about religion, kinship, economy, and today we will be reading the next social institution, which is polity or political setup of society, which is also known as the state or government. First of all, we should try to remember what government is about. Government includes the executive, the legislature, and the judiciary. When we talk of state, it does not only include the government, but it also includes other state agencies, the military, public education system. So, here we see that in the state, we would also have agencies of the government. When we think of agencies of the government, the first thing which comes into our mind is bureaucracy. Bureaucracy is the machinery through which state functions. And sociologists, they are interested in the power of the state and the balance between the state as well as the individual. This is the area of focus. So here, power exercised by state is the key point to be studied. Now, this power that we are talking about, it includes two elements. The first one is command and second one is obedience. So, someone issues a command and another person obeys it. Now, if the command which is issued contains a force and it is not backed up by rules, regulations or laws, then it is not accepted by people and this power is coercive. So, coercive power refers to the imposition of power using force or the threat of force against people who do not accept it as legitimate. But there is another type of power which is accepted by people, which is legitimate. It is known as authority. Here, the power of parliament, for example, to pass laws in a society is accepted by the citizens of that nation because the citizens have accepted the political system. If it is democracy or if it is parliamentary system, the people have accepted it, and that is why those in position or those in power have attained legitimacy. But why do the government or the government officials, why do they need power? They need power in order to control the decision-making power, right? So, decisions are taken in a society. It could be for the people, in favor of war, in favor of peace, in favor of refugees, in favor of other diplomatic channels. Any decision that is to be taken at the national level or later on at the grassroots level, these decisions are taken by government officials, and the ability to take this decision comes from the power which is legitimate or authority. And when we are studying politics, then we are actually studying the power which is used by government for different activities, and we are also studying the scope of this power. Now, authority is not an unfamiliar term. We have read it while studying Weber. We studied about 3 different types of authority, the ideal types. First one was traditional authority. One of the examples was of the monarchy. Second was charismatic authority. An example could be religious cults. The third type of authority in which we are interested in was the rational legal authority, and one of the organs to exercise this authority was bureaucracy. Thus, authority is a power that is legitimate and it is enacted through rules and regulations. This power is what we are going to study about today. Before proceeding, I would like to mention that in some places you would find that power is strictly associated with illegitimate commands or commands which are not accepted by people or which have a component of force, while authority is said to be something different from power and which is legitimate and which ensures compliance by people. Now, we cannot differentiate power and authority like that. So, if you have to write in your exam paper, then please use this definition as where power and authority are related. So, here authority you can say is like a subtype of power. Now, talking about rational legal authority, it is the authority which is bestowed upon the nation state. What is a nation state? Now, if you have read about modern world politics, then you would remember that we had something known as decolonization. Initially, the Western powers, they encroached on foreign lands and they formed colonies. They enslaved people, they collected taxes, they gathered the raw materials, they started forming markets. So, they were the rulers of these colonies. But with time, decolonization happened and the concept of nation or nationalism gained force, and people were aware that they belonged to one culture, one language or different languages, but they wanted to remain together. So this togetherness was felt by people, and that is why people of a particular territory or region, they came together to be called as people of one nation. And here the state which came up in order to govern it or to form laws or to implement these laws or to ensure protection of laws. So a nation state was born. Now, nation state would not include only people with same ethnic roots or similar ethnic roots or similar languages, but it had a certain power also. What was this power? This power was the rational legal authority. So, what did it include? It included legal political authority over a particular territory, then the authority to permit violence in order to protect the territory or for internal or external security. Also, it gave the nation state the power to go for diplomatic initiatives and alliances with other nations. So, rational legal authority had a wider scope than in the previous types of authority which we saw, like traditional, charismatic. These were less wide or of a lesser scope, and the legal rational authority was wider in scope, and it was a feature of the modern industrial society. Now, this nation state, how would it work? it worked through different agencies, and the major agency or the vehicle through which it acted was the bureaucracy. Bureaucracy had some features which we have written here. First one was that it was impersonal. Okay, they are personally free and subject to authority only with respect to their impersonal official obligations. So, the relationship between a bureaucratic official and the superior was that of official responsibilities and duties. Also, in the bureaucracy, there was a hierarchy of officials. Some people would be superior, some people would be subordinate. They were connected through this hierarchy of officials. And they also were competent. They had been recruited through an exam based on merit. There was also a fixed tenure, terms of employment, and they were qualified. They were also given fixed salaries, and this civil service or bureaucracy was the primary occupation of these people. They would also be judged from time to time. They would be appraised. Their performance would be appraised, and they would be promoted if they were found worthy. Also, they were not allowed to misuse their position for non-official purposes, and they had to abide by a certain ethic, work ethic or integrity, or they were under a discipline. There are certain theories which describe the power structure in a society, politics in a society, or those who own this power, authority in a society. First perspective is by Pareto and Mosca. It is the classical elite theory. They say that there are two main types of governing elite. Elite are people who enjoy a higher position, power, prestige in society than compared to the masses or the other people. So these two types of governing elite are the lions and the foxes. So lions, what do we mean by lions? Lions are those people who achieve power because of their ability to take direct and incisive action. So these people or the elite, they rule by force. For example, like military dictatorships. But on the other hand, the foxes, they are cunning and they rule through diplomatic means. And here we can see that an example could be the European democracies. Now, let's assume that in one case, the foxes are at the bottom, while the lions are the rulers. They are ruling. They are ruling through force, while the foxes are cunning and they are ruling through diplomacy. But with time, what happens? The lions, they may become less zealous. They may lose their forcefulness. They may lose the decision-making ability, and thus they decay. And with time, what happens? The foxes, because of their cunningness, they take the place of the lions. So what happens? Now, in the position 2, the foxes are at the top and the lions are at the bottom. Now the cunning foxes, they are ruling, and the lions whose force has depleted, they are being ruled, or they are at the bottom. But these lions, they do not give up easily, and some of them, though they are a minority, they join together and they overthrow the foxes. So this cycle goes on, and Pareto calls it a never-ending circulation of elites. So this game, you can say, of foxes and lions, it continues. It does not stop. And in society also, you can see that in some time, what happened in a particular time, if A is in power and B is being ruled over, then with time A might become less zealous, may lose some of its power, and the powerful A is then replaced by B. This kind of change in power happens in society, in polity, even with political leaders. You would see then one party is displaced by another party, which is more vigilant, more active, more vocal. So this kind of foxes and lions happens in society also. The second perspective is given by C. Wright Mills. He gives 3 types of power elite. He says that the power elite are the decision makers in the upper echelons of the political, economic and military institutions. So we have the political masters, we have the economic experts and the military officials. Mills says that these 3 elites, they form a triangle of power, and the power of decision making increases enormously, and in today's world these institutions, they are increasing in power day by day, because of which they are becoming enlarged and centralized. The next perspective is by Weber. He gives a term known as constant sum. What do we understand by constant sum? By constant sum, Weber says that there is a fixed amount of power in society, which means that if some hold power, then this power belongs to, let's say, a person A. So other person who also wanted this power cannot have it. So if this is the power, and if I take this power, then this place becomes vacant and nobody else has the access to this power. That is what is meant by constant term. There is a fixed amount of power, and if someone takes power, then that power, the place of power becomes vacant. So here what happens, the power holders or anyone who is exercising the power, they use this power for their self-interest, and this interest clashes with the interest of those who are subjected to power or who are below the powerful. So these are the powerless. They have certain interests, while the powerful have certain interests, and these two interests clash. But Parsons gives a different concept. He says that the power in a society is variable. It keeps on changing, and power is not the property of one person. It is a public resource. It is possessed by the society as a whole, and it is variable because it decreases or increases. It keeps on changing. It is not fixed. And how does it change? The power in a society depends on the efficiency of a social system. If it has the capacity to achieve the goals, then the power will increase. But if it has a lesser capacity to achieve goals, then the power will decrease. So depending on the efficiency of goal achieving, the power will appear or will exist in a society, and it is not fixed and it is a public commodity. It can be used by all. What do the pluralists say? Pluralists say that power is exercised by two kinds of pressure groups. The first pressure group is in favor of a particular group. For example, the medical association. So they are defending the interests of this group. They are known as protective groups, while the other group is known as promotional group because it is working for a particular cause and not a social issue or social group. So this one is for a particular group, while this one is for a particular issue or cause. So here it could be a medical association, while here it could be for the environment, for any environmental concern. Now, the Marxist, you must be familiar by now that they try to see the other side of the coin. They try to see power also in a capitalist society, and they try to understand whether the coming of democracy will play any role in the power, whether democracy will ensure a fair usage of power. Now, Engels, what does he say? He says that even after democracy comes or democracy is established, in a modern society, the power stays with the ruling class only. You would remember the ruling class or the capitalist class that we studied while studying Marxist theory. And the Marxists say that these democratic states create only the illusion of democracy. Why? Because the capitalists, they are corrupted and they use their financial power to shape the state policies. How do they do it? Now you would remember that when we were studying Marxism, we studied that the ruling class or the capitalist class, they ruled over the masses or the working class. Now the ruling class, they were in control of the superstructure and they were also controlling the infrastructure. And through the superstructure, they were influencing the policies of the state. So here we were talking about this policy, that through the political power, through the state policies, the capitalists are trying to force their power, or they are trying to stay in the ruling class only. And what happens? What does the state do? The state also supports the ruling class in furthering its interest. So here there is a consensus, or there is an agreement between the state and the capitalists. This is what the Marxists say. They say that the state and the capitalists are in agreement, and together they are ruling over the masses, they are ruling over the workers, and even democracy cannot lessen the ruling power of the capitalists. And how does the state then come out of this? How does this exploitation end? This exploitation will end only when communist societies form and the means of production is owned communally, that is by the community. Only then what would happen? The proletariat would be able to defeat the ruling class. So in short, here you can see that the ruling class plus the state, they rule over the working class. This is what the Marxists say, and they say that even in a democracy this happens, and what democracy is there, it shows that it is a government by the people, for the people, of the people, but in reality it is actually with the ruling class. It is working in favor of ruling class, working for the interests of the ruling class. We have a new Marxist, Gramsci. He says that in a society, the ruling class is in control of the economic infrastructure, and it also influences the superstructure through the state. Now, here what happens? The ruling class wants to control the civil society also. So what does it do, the ruling class? It tries to form alliances with other groups in order to dominate the masses. So, what is happening here? The ruling class is coming together with other sections in order to rule the civil society. So, it has influence over the state, that is through the political society. It is working together in order to bring civil society also under its control. This control which it is exercising is known as hegemony. So, while in the Marxist we saw that the ruling class with the help of state was working on the working class or influencing the working class. But neo-Marxist, they say that the ruling class alone cannot subjugate the civil society. So what does it do? It forms alliances with other similar classes or other similar capitalists, and it starts dominating the society, and this domination is known as hegemony. And the alliance which is formed is known as historic bloc. Now, modern society that we are studying is studied by Anthony Giddens, and he says that in a modern society, globalization has reduced the space, and at a particular time we can talk to or we can be in touch with many people at a time because of the power of internet. But this globalization is also increasing competition in the world, and nations are competing for different businesses and financial markets, and a global economy is being formed. Because of this global economy, nation states, they are competing against each other in order to attract investment from different multinational corporations, MNCs. And here, what is happening? What is the solution to this competition? They form alliances, or they form different groups against these transnational corporations and other groups. They may form, let's say, certain trade blocs to counter these multinational corporations. There is another thinker who, though does not want to be called a postmodernist, yet he has been influenced by postmodernist ideas. His name is Michel Foucault. He says that power is not concentrated in any institution, and it does not flow from top to bottom. It does not include any hierarchy. Then what is power? He says that power is relational. It is based on the relation between different individuals or groups, and it is a flexible concept. It has many sources and points, and it shifts. Also, he says that when we look at power in order to understand for example, the sexuality, and we consider men as more powerful, or adults as more powerful, or parents more powerful than children, or doctors more powerful than their patients, then we say that there is a section of people like the women who are less powerful than men, adolescents who are less powerful than adults, children less powerful than parents, and patients who are less powerful than the doctors. But this is a rigid or narrow definition of power. Foucault says that we cannot define power in such narrow terms. We cannot say that power is concentrated in a particular location, in a particular institution, in a particular person or a social status. On the other hand, power is omnipresent. It is present everywhere, and it flows in all directions. It permeates different discourses and different places. Thus, you can relate this concept with the concept of stratification, which was given by Dipankar Gupta. He also said something along the lines of power is not hierarchical, or stratification is not hierarchical. He insisted on the difference, and he says that differences do not mean inequality, or differences do not mean superior, subordinate. Similarly, here Foucault also says that power is flexible and it is present everywhere. It is a relative concept, it is a relational concept, and we cannot choose to say that a particular person, a particular institution, a particular person of a status has a certain higher power. Now, what happens to the people who are under the power or under the authority of nation state? What if the citizens or some citizens of a nation, they refuse to accept the authority of nation state? We are talking about some people, not the majority. What happens then? People may choose to disobey the power or disobey the authority, disobey the laws framed by those in authority, disobey the terms of any, let's say, employment or business. If there are people who refuse to follow, who refuse to obey, in this situation, terrorism is born. Terrorism is the use of violence or threat of violence to coerce governments and authorities and populations by inducing fear. So, a certain group does not agree with the terms, with the laws of the government, and they resort to violence, or they threat that they would use violence against either people, the population, or the government. Now, this is associated with those people who have limited support by the public, but they are very rigid and they are zealous towards their cause. They believe that their cause is right, and they want to work towards the fulfillment of their cause. They believe that the opposition or the government, let's say, is wrong, evil, or illegitimate, and therefore they believe that any means that they choose to topple the government, to work against the government, is right, because they believe that their cause is right. And these people who indulge in such terrorist activities, they are known as terrorists, and they believe that it is they who have the final truth, and actually they are working for the welfare of society, and for this purpose they resort to violence. They can kill people, they can hold people hostages so that their demands are met, so that their causes are fulfilled. And usually these people, they are educated, they are young people, they may belong to the middle or the upper class backgrounds, and they see terrorism as a form of protest against social justice. So these terrorist activities are working for social justice, and they are form of protest against the popular government, and they believe that their cause is right. That is why they indulge in violence. Now, what happens then? How should the state react? The state launches a war on terror. We have seen how the US state used its military power in order to tackle this terrorist activities, for example in Afghanistan, in Iraq. But Noam Chomsky has a different view. He says that actually when the US launched its war on terror, then it was working with the economic elites, which were the corporations, in order to spread US capitalism. So the purpose of this war was to topple the traditional governments which was there in these nations, and to bring capitalism in those new nations. That was the purpose, and it was a form of power or coercive power of US. This is what Noam Chomsky says. Now, terrorism is one form of protest. What about other forms of protest? What happens when people of a nation, the citizens, they are discontent with the policies of the government and they want to protest, they want to bring social change, they want to resist? Then there are several forms of expressions of these dissent or discontent. One can be a protest, for example, in the form of candlelight processions or shouting slogans. There can be an agitation in the form of strikes, mass leaves, rioting or picketing. And the most violent form is the revolution, when there is a sudden, sweeping and violent change in social system. So this is an extreme form of social dissent or expression of discontent by collectivity. So all these differ only in terms of degree of the expression. All are forms of discontent or dissent, but they differ only in degree. The state also gives a certain right to dissent through voting in elections. So people have a right to express their opinion in a state when they vote. If they are displeased with a certain form of government, then they can vote against the government. If they want a person to be in power, they can vote in favor of that person. Now, continuing with the different kinds of dissent, we have different kinds of movements. Anthony Giddens gives 4 kinds of movements which are created by 4 conditions. Whenever there is a capitalism or capitalist society, then when people learn about the demerits of capitalism, then people become more aware of labor rights. They start movements for the laborers, and these movements are known as labor movements. When a state, on the other hand, exercises too much of military power, then people realize that power or war is not good in long term, it is not advantageous, it is harmful for the people, and they start peace movements. In the third type, when there is a surveillance by the government, when it tries to invade the privacy of its citizens, then people start marching in favor of free speech or democracy. And finally, when there is rapid urbanization, industrialization, and environment starts getting affected, then people launch movements for ecology. So these are the 4 kinds of social movements which take place under these 4 triggers. Social movements are collective efforts to either promote or resist change. Now, when we think of current affairs, how can we relate the current affairs with today's topic? Recently, we saw farmers protested against the farm bill because they were displeased with the new clauses, and they realized that it might be disadvantageous to the minimum support price, and also they were doubtful about the government procurement process. That means how their produce will be procured by the government, and they started voicing their opinion in favor of farmers' rights. Similarly, we also saw George Floyd protests, and it started as a movement, as a protest against police brutality, but it turned its direction and it started speaking for civil rights, and the movement was known as Black Lives Matter. Thus we can see that how people of a nation state, how they also voice their dissent, how they also voice their opinion against the policies of the government, against the atrocities of the government. So today's portion you will be studying from Blue Haralambus, the chapter on power and politics. If you want, you can read Anthony Giddens also. You can go through it once, just glance through it, but your main focus should be Blue Haralambus. Try to go through the theories, and your focus should be to understand, not to remember, not to memorize, not to go for rectification, but please try to understand and grasp the meaning of the different thinkers. Now, there are many theories in this topic, They are confusing and you might find it to be a bit boring or monotonous, but please try to read it. And if you feel that the blue Haralambas is too vast, you can also go for orange Haralambas. That is all for today. The next TFT will be on social change, and please keep on revising and completing all the previous TFTs. Some of you have joined us late, so please try to complete all the TFTs, and then we will start social change, which would give a gist of all that we have studied till now, because it would be the application of theories. It would include current affairs also. So please keep revising. All the best.